Banter, I hardly know her. Yes. Welcome back to SwitchCast Live. It is 8 p.m. on a Wednesday night, and you know what that means. Actually, you probably have a better show on Netflix or something like that at 8 p.m., so you're listening to us at a different time. And that's totally fine, as long as you support our sponsors. Just kidding. Anyway, I am your host, Doug Tabbutt, founder of Switch Cars and Cannonball Run record holder. And with me tonight is Tony Kern-Civic. I literally just learned how to pronounce that. I think I've known him for a decade, but we call him Tony K, and he goes by Tony K on just about every automotive forum, of which he pontificates as an expert, probably because he is an expert. Tony K is a staple of the Cleveland and Toledo car community. He is an expert in oddball cars and a longtime British and Italian, primarily, car collector. Have you had anything other than British and Italian cars?
Lots of German cars, Porsches, Mercedes.
Okay. All right. No gray German sedans, though.
None.
And Tony is integral in Toledo Cars and Coffee.
I run Toledo Cars and Coffee.
You run Toledo Cars and Coffee, and he also has a famous car party at his house every year, which is not just a car party. It's Concord 11s meets Radwood, kind of in his front lawn. And how many cars do you have every year at that? 40-ish?
Yeah, 40-ish.
Yeah. And what do the neighbors think of that?
Most of them like it. They in our current home, they love it. We get compliments. They they think it's just another nice perk to living in the neighborhood.
Sure. Well, you don't have drag racing afterwards or the crazy exits. You don't have loud bands playing. It's really just kind of a chill hangout. But it is pretty exciting. I've been trying to go, I think for the last 10 years you've invited me, and I always had something going on. Usually I think it was my buddy Frank's rib burn-off, which for some odd reason was more enticing than a car gathering. But the year I finally went was last year. I realized what all the hoopla and excitement was about. It was a really, really good, odd, eclectic, and amazing collection of cars. Everything from a brand new Ford GT to a Lotus Eclat or Elite or something, this shooting brake two-door thingamabob.
A chop-top gremlin.
Yeah. Yes, that. And everything in between. And I actually, tell me the story. So you said, what's your rule for the car party?
There are a lot of rules. You're talking specifically about the gray German sedan.
Yes.
Okay. Do you want to jump to that, or do you want me to give the premise?
Give the premise first, and then we'll talk about the rules.
Okay. It began in 2008, and that was Cars and Coffee was just a rumor in Ohio back then. Mm-hmm. And I had recently moved to Toledo, and there wasn't really any community of people who like the European exotic sports kind of cars. And we knew a Lotus owner here, a Porsche owner there, a DeLorean owner somewhere else. And my wife and I decided, my wife Patty, love you, we decided we would just pull everybody together and have a party, have a cookout. And the premise was, number one, just trying to get everybody together. Number two, no jerks, okay? Some people, their ego is wrapped up in their car, and other people, it's just a car. Mm-hmm. We invited only the latter group.
Yep.
Okay? So just, nice, friendly
How did
people.
I get an invite then?
I didn't know you that well.
And then it was too late to take back.
Number three, we were kind of poking fun at Concord d'Elegance culture. When we would do the awards ceremony, we would put on blue blazers and straw hats. Kind of like looking like we're from a barbershop quartet. And then it was a little bit of and actually the inspiration for the awards actually came from something in here, which we'll probably touch on.
The Cannonball book, yes, for those listening later.
And then the biggest thing that Doug was referring to, this was happening at the time, when I was growing up, when I was a kid, there were red cars, blue cars, green cars, orange cars, brown cars. And at some point in the 90s...
Lots and lots of brown cars.
Yes, lots of brown cars. And at some point in the 1990s, everything became a silver Audi. and I want to say also that, at this, in the 2000s when we started this, these 1980s and 90s and 70s European sports and exotic cars, a lot of them were practically worthless. The nicest Porsche 944 was $4,000. Okay, so
and a major service was $5,000.
Yes, and so it wasn't like there was any kind of barrier to entry at that point in time, but I think a lot of people back then were just afraid to buy a Porsche or an Alfa Romeo or something like that. There was still kind of a stigma of it's always going to be in the shop and you can't get parts, something left over from the 80s. So everybody was buying, all the new cars, not all, but many new cars in the 90s and 2000s were gray German sedans, it's particularly in Ohio, Audis and BMWs, gray, charcoal, anthracite, black, white, alabaster, whatever it was. And
the Mercedes took it to a new level in the 2000s. It was the liquid silver, the Alubeam, the 3-layer silver that was like a $20,000 or $40,000 paint option. But it was still gray.
Yes, and so the automotive landscape just turned very bleak before our eyes. Some parking lots in some places just look like a massive funeral procession.
I'm sorry. I find it slightly funny. I know what you're referring to, but I find it slightly funny that coming out of the literally described as the malaise era of brown smog-choked land yachts, you say that the 90s was the time that it became bleak. Come on. I know what you're referring to. It's because color. But goodness gracious, from a design standpoint, that's when cars started to get good again.
So, but here's the other thing. So, at that point in time, anybody could afford a 944 or a 914 or a variety of other cars, and I think a lot of people still, shied away from it and instead bought the gray German sedan. Mm-hmm. So. And honestly, we were sick of seeing gray German sedans everywhere we went. So we made a rule for the car party. Bring your fun, interesting sports, exotic, collectible cars, but no gray German sedans. Black and white are shades of gray, and wagon is a shade of sedan.
I'll take issue with you on the wagon part. Wagons have become super elite now. But you did. I remember there was a gray E63 wagon, which I was all excited about, but you made him park on the street.
Yes,
for the last car party, and it ended up backfiring too because a fire truck was coming down the narrow street. It was lined by exotic cars, and those firemen were just all hot and bothered, pun intended. But and that guy in the E63 couldn't move his car fast enough to get out of the way. So
he shouldn't have brought it.
Yeah,
I mean that's it. The gray German cars get kicked to the
I wish we could make that rule for like all cars and coffee. And I say this, I fully understand that I'm like kind of on the line of the old cranky car snob that is looking at these self-described hoonigans in gray German sedans that have loud exhausts and, built-in vape filters and, Stance Nation and all that. But like, don't bring them to Cars and Coffee. Like, nobody wants to see those except you and your posse. I recognize the enthusiasm. I recognize that those are the future of car guys, and they are car guys in their own right. And probably back in the, the poodle skirt era, people were saying that about the guys modifying, Ford coupes. But Cars and Coffee should be, I don't know how you do this without being a snob about it. I guess kind of like the way you do it with your car party, but Cars and Coffee should be interesting, unique cars, not just poorly modified versions of gray German sedans.
It is a fine line that you walk because you want to be welcoming to everybody. You want to invite people. And yes, a lot of the tuner crowd and the gray German sedan crowd and whatnot are the future Ferrari, Lamborghini, Porsche owners. And then also, if you start to say, well, we only want this kind of car, then people start to call you a snob or a prick or something like that.
Right.
So,
well, and a lot of the times the people that own those types of cars are snobs and pricks. So you might get a better caliber of car, but not necessarily a better caliber of person.
Yes, and it's kind of a fine line you walk, because you have to, what I say with Toledo Cars and Coffee is that our core constituency, we cater first and foremost to the exotic sports and luxury car crowd, okay? Because what happens is the event gets too popular and it gets flooded with Challengers and Camaros and A4, slammed A4s or whatever. And then all of a sudden, an event that was, 80% European exotics and special interest cars all of a sudden becomes 15 or 20%. And then
you lose the interesting cars because they don't really want to go hang out with an event that is primarily composed of riffraff anymore.
So I'd be careful on the word riffraff, because a lot of them.
Well, but those groups bring the riffraff, right? So it's like I'll tell you what brings the riffraff is Facebook.
I
thought it was Dodge Challengers. Honestly, I thought that was the line of there's a riffraff.
I will say this with Toledo Cars and Coffee, 100% of the problems we have had of people doing burnouts in the parking lot or just the liabilities have been the late model muscle car crowd.
Oh, that'd be me. Keep going.
The tuner crowd have always been cool and respectful. Everybody tends to be, but if we get anybody who, if we've ever had anybody who was making too much noise or breaking the rules, and all Cars and Coffees pretty much have the same rules nowadays.
Yeah,
it always comes from the same.
I'm trying to think. So when I originally sent out the emails for Cleveland Cars and Coffee, when I was running it. After I started it, I remember the tagline. It's coming back to me now because I remember along the lines of one of the rules was no burnouts. The other it was B's, because it was no burnouts, no boring cars. So it wasn't a specific like you have to bring an exotic or luxury car. It was just no boring cars. So it could be any end of the price spectrum. It was just like if your car is boring or not. If it has rear doors, it's probably boring.
We had
no burnouts, no bad attitudes, no burnouts. There was 4 things.
I didn't have the alliteration. I'm not quite the poet that you are, but I did draw a map of the parking for Toledo Cars and Coffee, and it was in a shopping center that we did in a shopping center one year, and like behind the shopping center where, like where the dumpsters were, I labeled that section beige Camrys. So
we tried to do that. So we moved. Our Cars and Coffee was initially at Key 55, which is this waterfront cafe attached to an apartment building. It was beautiful.
I was there for the second one. I missed the very first one.
Yeah, and it was like you couldn't park more than 50 cars in the parking lot. So it was great, and it was kind of a self-filtering event. And then the cafe closed, so we had to move to Starbucks in Garfield Heights. And more people started coming, and I was trying to kind of like cordon off the upper parking area for the more interesting cars. And then everybody else could filter in, and I got some kickback for that. Wow, you're trying to be too exclusive, whatever. And the kickback I got was from the guys in the gray German sedans who would show up at 7:30 and the event started at 9 so that they could park front and center in the upper area. And I'm like, it's not that you're not welcome. It's just that nobody's coming to see a car that they can walk down to the BMW dealer and buy 8 of that afternoon.
That, and then in a city like Cleveland or Toledo, any night of the week, there are a handful of events that you can go to for muscle cars or tuners or something like that. And there really was no gathering for the European sports and exotics.
Right.
And that was really the the core purpose of it. I mean, we get a lot of other interesting stuff too.
Or just kind of cross-demographic,
Yes.
cross-branding.
Yeah.
So
We have a guy that occasionally comes to Toledo Cars and Coffee with a 19,000-mile base model AMC Pacer. That doesn't fit in anywhere either.
right.
So
Right.
we love the interesting
And
stuff.
it's not necessarily a good car, but it's not boring.
It's cool. Yeah, exactly. It's not boring.
It's interesting. Oh gosh. Yeah. So I threatened to Tony that I was going to bring the the notorious. Sorry, I got to choose my big words here and not be Michael Scott. The notorious silver passenger car to his car party one year because it is very much a gray German sedan, and it was disguised to be as vanilla as possible. So I was wondering, I was going to test him and see if I brought Angry Ursula, the Cannonball E63, if he would kick it off of the lawn or not.
And we had much discussion over this, and we ultimately decided to give it a place of honor.
Yes.
So, and we were hoping you were going to bring the Audi,
Yep.
the Ford Taurus.
Yep.
And you
Yeah,
showed up in a
Arnie
Corvette.
couldn't make it at the last minute, but I think next year. So the E63 is being rebuilt. It's mostly done. They're fighting some electrical stuff, but I'm sure by next year it'll be done. So one way or another, I'll make sure that I feel like it's only fitting the gray German sedan makes it there. But
It will be the only one.
yes. We can let other people complain who have no idea what the car is. Just don't say anything. We'll take all the stickers off, and I'll just get one sticker that just says gray German sedan.
Perfect.
Yeah, so I was actually fortunate enough to win an award. It was the first event I had gone to. I should have gotten an award for like the I should have gotten like the Scarlet Pimpernel Award because I was so elusive. I tried and been invited 10 years and didn't make it. But yeah, so I got this old 80s van, 70s van on it, and they were trying to figure out what to write on it. This is a trophy for those of you in the audio audience. And the award was Seems Legit. It was about my Cannonball shenanigans. And on the side you wrote free puppies because, vans are notorious in memes for trying to rope people in to one thing or another. But I realized a few days later, my jokes are sometimes funny, but they're not always quick. I realized a few days later, or months or something, that we totally mislabeled this for car guys. We should have written on the side, free 10 millimeters.
One of these days. It's had a number of things written on the side of the van.
Yeah.
But when we did the first car party, it was kind of an impromptu thing. And we had a bunch of nutcases show up, just a nice hodgepodge group of friends. And I had one friend who drove from Cincinnati in some kind of a supercharged Bentley or something, and he told us how much fuel he consumed on the way there. And that, I drawing on inspiration from this book, which I had read years prior, one of the awards that Brock Yates gave out was the Friends of OPEC award.
Yep.
And so...
Didn't Dennis Mad Dog Mendocini got that, right? For
yes.
his GMC pickup
Yes.
truck. Yep.
For
Yep.
however many 100 gallons they consumed. So I said to Patty, quick, let's make some awards. And we just took pieces. We took some ribbon and we just cut little lengths of ribbon and cut a bunch of circles out in cardboard. And we looked around at the cars and we just made a bunch of silly awards. So one of them was Friends of OPEC. But there was another guy who had driven a Lola Formula Ford race car to the party on public roads. So
From how far away?
Probably about a mile and a half.
That's pretty cool.
And during the party, someone looked at it and said, "Yeah, you drove this here?" He said, "Yeah." I said, "Well, that's almost legal." And so that became what we called so that first time won the Almost Legal Award. was that Formula Ford.
So that's kind of the seems legit one is like the evolution of that, right?
Yeah, we had to
What
we
I
had to
did
change
across the country was
Yes. Yeah.
You had to change the verbiage for obvious reasons.
Yes.
Okay,
So,
we'll leave that there. Oh man. So all right, Tony drove. Those of you who are VinWiki fans, I guess, diehard ones, and or who have watched all of the podcasts and remember the Jeff Badger story of Club Motor Estates, will get where I'm going quickly. But for the rest of you, for the majority of you, you drove in a Jaguar S-type.
Yes.
Which is a rebodied Ford Taurus. Am I oversimplifying it?
It is. It's the Ford DEW platform, which is the Lincoln LS and the Thunderbird.
Okay, all right. I am oversimplifying it because the Lincoln LS platform was actually a decent chassis. They did not age well at all. I mean, styling-wise they did, but the cars were horrendously unreliable. But anyway, car guys really like to make fun of the Jaguar S-type. It was an unloved car. It did not do well for Jaguar, and both the S-type and the X-type kind of just... I don't know. They're not usually stereotypically serious, legit car guys don't drive those. That's the stereotype anyway, right? Okay. Not trying to be unkind to your choice of auto. It's also old man tan.
Yes, it's beige as beige gets.
Man.
It's topaz is the name of the color. It doesn't get any more old man tan than that.
Jason Camisa calls it Jewish racing gold. But so anyway. So you drove in on that, and I had a flashback. I thought it was so funny because that was the car. Do you know who Jeff Badger is?
I've
the
heard
Club Motor Estates guy. The guy who started...
Is that Chicago area?
No, it's Cleveland.
Okay.
There are ones in Chicago, but they're legit ones. This guy was springboarding off of the success of those and actually legitimately copying their marketing videos and promotional stuff and 3D renderings because he didn't have his own. To market one in Cleveland, but it was essentially a scam, and he used people's deposit money to buy a building, but then didn't have money to build out because he never had the money to buy the building. He had gotten a loan from a capital company, but they withdrew the financing, and so he had to come up with another way to get the funds. So he sold people. They gave him $100,000 deposits. He used those to buy the building, even though that money was supposed to be used for the build out. So then people owned an empty space that hadn't been built out. The building got foreclosed on. A whole big thing. But he came to me when he was still pitching the idea, and tried to get me kind of on board, whatever, wanted me to, cross market, be involved. And I said, basically you get it built, we'll talk, but I'm not going to front you any money. I'm not going to pitch it to my clients until I see what you've done and I know you can be trusted. I don't care what you're offering me. Yep. So the red flag that went up in my head that said this guy is not to be trusted, he's not a real car guy, is that he drove in a Jaguar S-type.
It's a sure sign you don't have any money.
And I was like, what? I mean, fine, if you like them and you want to own one, fine. But if I owned one and I was going to meet the owner of a dealership that I needed their,
you'd be better in a C class.
Exactly. I'd be better in a rental Hyundai because at least that would signal, well, you're not trying.
Yep.
You're driving an economical car, and it wouldn't. But it was like, well, you're trying, but you fell short.
In defense of the S-type.
I want to hear this.
All right. So I want you to think back to the 1990s when cars went from being angular to being jelly bean aero blobs. And, Ford introduced the oval-shaped Taurus and Sable, and Ford had recently purchased Jaguar.
Mm-hmm.
And they introduced the S-type at about 99 or so. And when I first saw it, I thought, I hated it. To me, it was a glorified Taurus. Mm-hmm. It didn't have the crisp swages of a real Jaguar.
That's okay. Glorified Tauruses have set Cannonball records.
This is true. and so I did not like the car one bit. And you could see the cost cutting in the design of it from a mile away. And
I thought you were trying to defend it.
I'm gonna get there. and the early ones were nowhere near the quality of the later ones. Okay, and here's what happened. I'm going to give a shout out to the current president of the Jaguar Club of Ohio, Juan Becerra, my good friend. In I'd say about 2010 or so. No, 2013. 2013. We were living in Cleveland. We had a car party in Cleveland. And at that time, I had lent a Lotus Esprit to Quaker Steak and Lube in Sheffield, and it was up on the lift inside the restaurant, which was great because the manager would give me steak dinners anytime I stopped by. It was a very popular attraction inside the restaurant.
Yeah. And then you didn't need oil on your fries. You could
right. just hold on to the Lotus.
Eat underneath the Lotus.
They had to stick a rag up under the valve, the cam cover, because it actually did drip.
I'm surprised they didn't completely drain it.
So there's a video somewhere on YouTube where I was driving into it. But anyway, and so the Quaker Steak cruise in. So we had a guest at the car party who had flown in from the UK. The one and only Bibbs, who runs the Lotus forums. He made a surprise visit. A bunch of my friends arranged for him to surprise.
Wow.
So he wanted to get a taste of American car culture. And we said, well, let's go to Quaker Steak because you can see an American cruise in and we can eat dinner under my S1. And so we did, and we're there, and it's full of hot rod, Chevelles and Mustangs and everything. And there was one DeLorean, and then there was this young dude in a Jaguar S-type, and he was just a total nut about European cars and Jaguars and Ferraris and all of that stuff. And at that point in time, I still am very much in a mode of, I want to get to know anybody like that, right? So we started talking with this guy, Juan, and, he's a pretty cool guy and everything. And, so his car was this Jaguar S-type, and it was in absolutely perfect condition. It was, show quality, which even by that time, a lot of them weren't. And at one point in, months later, I got my first ride in it, and I said, yeah, it's not that bad, okay? And then at one point, probably about 2014 or so, about a year later, I was looking for some economical transportation, and I started looking into these S-types, and the early ones I would avoid. The early V8s have the same issues that the early V8s and the other Jaguars of that era have, and the early ones have a Ford transmission, a Ford 5-speed automatic that gives trouble, and the suspension doesn't feel anywhere near as good. The interior is, I'll quote a magazine called it Euro bland. But then in 2003, they completely revamped the interior. They revamped the suspension. They revamped everything except the exterior, and everything was a step up. And it had a 6-speed ZF transmission, the same one that was put in every luxury car in that era. And that engine, the V8 I wouldn't buy, but the 3-liter V6 it's a derivative of the Mondeo V6, the Duratec V6.
Yep. So
that is an engine that really has no weak areas. It has no Achilles heel. It was, if I'm not mistaken, I believe that Ford paid Porsche to do some of the development work on that engine. It's smooth. They don't leak. They don't have any cylinder liner, chain tensioner issue. They don't have any issues like that. It's just a good, solid, smooth engine. And, there's probably been a couple million of them. There's been millions of them made at this point, and they're powering Escapes and Tauruses all over the world, and they're just doing so without any drama, okay? So it's
very un-Jaguar-like of them.
So, yes. So here's this great, reliable engine hooked up to a great, reliable transmission, and the corrosion protection on those cars is excellent. And it was one of the
aluminum bodied?
No, they are steel bodied,
okay.
But they're galvanized, and they have, they did a great job. In the UK, you'll find some with rusted sills behind the plastic sill covers, But we're just now, these things are all 15 to 22 years old at this point, and we're just now seeing rusty ones here. That's
Wow.
Even in Ohio. Look at how many S-types.
Chevy trucks start rusting after 15 months.
and Dodge, Yeah. So, and the other thing is, it was one of the first cars to have a 5-star rear passenger side impact rating, and I had two little daughters at the time, and the later ones, the early ones, the interior, nah, but the later ones, the interior, it does have a nice sense of occasion to it. So here is a nice, smooth, quiet, safe, reliable car, and it was Ford everywhere that you wanted something to be reliable and economical, and it was Jaguar where you wanted something to be pretty or robust. So
Great. Well, so the entire rest of the show is going to make fun of cars that you drive, but you just
Okay.
own me on that one. So,
Oh no,
I got no more material. So if you would like to call in and make fun of his cars or ask serious questions, because I don't have any serious questions. I'm not a serious person.
Are they showing?
You can call in. What's that?
Are they showing pictures of the cars on the podcast right now?
No,
Okay.
they're not. We're not that fancy
Okay.
yet. Anyway, you can call in and chat with us. I'm sorry I forgot to give the number at the beginning of the show. It is 216-294-4124, 216-294-4124, or you can post your questions in the comment flow of wherever you're watching live, and Ethan will relay them to me. I would be remiss if I didn't thank one of our sponsors, and I might be remiss because I can't find the sponsor. There we go. Celebrity Machines is a proud sponsor of SwitchCast. Celebrity Machines offers more than 250 different screen-accurate license plates as they appeared in movies and TV shows like Back to the Future, Ghostbusters, The Fast and the Furious, Breaking Bad, and so many more. Celebrity Machines also makes our commemorative 2539 plates from the fastest Cannonball run ever. If you're looking for a great Father's Day gift, go to celebritymachines.com and enter discount code SwitchCast to save a whopping 25.39% at checkout. See what I did there? That's right. Even with record high aluminum prices, that discount code is still active. It's the best kept secret in commemorative aluminum movie and TV show license plate purchasing ever. There you go. Again, call in 216-294-4124 if you want to chat with the Northeast Ohio legendary Tony K about Lotus, about vintage Porsches, the young timers cars. They're calling them young timer cars now. Although your car collection and enthusiasm starts kind of at a little bit before that, like mid to late 70s, right?
I think, at least in Europe, those are still considered young timers.
Okay. I think of young timer cars kind of like the same as like the Rad era stuff. And we were talking about Radwood at dinner, actually. You had a couple of good observations about Radwood. Relay that again.
Yeah, I mean, I'll start by saying I'm so glad that Radwood came about. I'm going to talk generations here for a moment.
Mm-hmm.
So as a Gen Xer, I bought my first old classic collectible car in 1991.
What was it?
A 77 Trans Am. Now, I can never use that for a security question on my online banking again. Thanks. Well,
no, I mean, only if that was your first pet.
Well,
that's usually the security question.
My first pet was a rattlesnake.
What was its name?
Its name was...
That's the question you can't answer because that is a security question.
Its name was Cannonball.
Cannonball.
Boy. I'm about to pull a Kaiser Soze off of you. I'm reading off the wall behind you here.
Right. Well,
and my other pet was Baker.
77 Trans Am. So I assume you're a big fan of Smokey and the Bandit.
I think I enjoyed it.
You enjoyed it. And a big fan of Cannonball.
Aren't we all?
Aren't we all? A lot of people still haven't seen the movie. It's hit or miss. I mean, okay. The better question is you had seen the movie Cannonball Run you said you had read Brock Yates' Cannonball book. So were you interested in the movie because you knew about the real Cannonball, or vice versa?
I first saw the movie 1 and 2 in the 80s when they came on television. They would usually come on around the holidays, like Thanksgiving or something like that. Just same time like The Spy Who Loved Me would come on, And, as a kid in the 80s, you see a Countach on the, driving through the desert. It changes your, it happened to quite a few of us, I'd like to think.
Yeah.
And
it initiates the process.
Yes. So it wasn't until I was a teenager that I learned it was a real thing. Somewhere I bought that 1971, I think, issue of Car and Driver magazine. I the one that says Cannonball across the cover.
75, it should be August
75?
1975. I have it in my office. This one. I
think so.
Yeah, that was August 1975.
Okay,
There it is for all you people watching. Yep, it's Bill Warner's 911 on the front and a Trans Am behind it.
The Super Duty Trans Am, right?
Yep.
Yes. And I believe that car was, I think I read about that car. That may have been how I found out it was a real race. I think I read an issue of High Performance Pontiac magazine back in the 90s, back in the early to mid 90s. And I believe that there was a feature on that car. I think it was in Illinois at the time.
Okay.
So.
All right. So back to your first car. It was a 77 Trans Am, and then back to Radwood, because this is all how it.
Okay. So
the big circle we were going.
All right. So, I'm a Gen Xer. Just in case anybody forgot, there's a generation in between the baby boomers and the millennials. Okay. and there are not a lot of there just aren't a lot of Gen X car enthusiasts. Not the muscle car types, and not the sports and exotic types either.
Mm-hmm.
And for years and years, I would go to car events, and I was always kid or boy everywhere I went. And so for a very long time, I was 20 to 25 years younger than everybody else at every car event I went to, and so I was very thankful when Radwood came about, when the millennial generation finally became of car collecting age, and the whole market floated up, because for the longest time the cars I liked were worthless because the generation older than me didn't like them. So every magazine said that a Lotus Esprit S1 was a car to avoid. However the Europa was incredible.
You will never ever see that in any publication now. Honestly, I feel like they've just started using new euphemisms for garbage cars, and it's the next big thing. It's underappreciated. No, it's this car sucks. And that's why it hasn't gone above 10 grand, but everybody's all about collectability and future value now. So it's just like, well, this is the next big thing. I'm like, no, it really shouldn't be.
Well, I kind of get the sense that the market value of a particular model tends to follow the disposable income of the people who like it the most.
Yes.
So
yeah, it's the Jay Leno, sort of the Jay Leno theory of people pay for what they remember.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, nobody was paying for, and there was nobody remembering. Anybody who liked, an early Lotus Esprit didn't have any money, and so that followed through to the 80s Esprits and whatnot. And they were, and the Ferrari 308, for how long was a Ferrari 308 a $25,000 to $35,000 car, while its predecessor, the Dino, was 10 times that amount or more? And for what? Why? I think that was probably the single bit
looks.
I beg to differ, but
Sure.
I don't think either of them are terrific cars. I think they're both gorgeous cars, but
they're good cars.
10 times, but for one to be a multiple of 10 of the price of the other, or the the E-Type versus the XJS. Okay.
I'll argue you there.
I
mean, if only for looks on that. The E-Type is one of the most beautiful cars ever produced across any manufacturer, and the XJS is a car.
I believed that because for many years magazines told me that, like Octane or Classic and Sports Car or whatever. And then one day I was a caretaker of a black 91 convertible XJS for somebody, and I had a friend who had a black E-Type. That was a Series 3 E-Type, okay?
Which is, the less pretty ones.
But in any case, one time, just for fun, we parked the two of them together, kind of like you would for like a photo shoot, kind of like pointing to each other. And I stood there looking at it, and I said, the XJS is this sleek, svelte, trim, tapered car with just beautiful proportions, and the E-Type is a clown shoe.
It's a pretty clown shoe. And how many iconic movies has the XJS been in versus the E-Type? That may influence it too.
That may influence it
a lot.
Harold and Maude, right?
All right, we have somebody on hold here who Robert from Texas.
Howdy.
How are you doing?
Howdy. Hello from Texas.
Yes, hello. Your friend Bailey. Do you know Bailey Walton?
I do not. I would love to meet them,
It's
though.
it's a big state.
Cars, nice.
He's here tonight, but he's from Texas, sort of, but he's really from here. But yeah, he moved to Texas.
Well,
anyway,
howdy from his new home.
Yes. He salutes you
Well,
from the studio. Okay, go ahead. Sorry, you had a real question.
So I recently acquired a 2002 Maserati Coupe GT, and through my research, found out that they only made 35 of them for the U.S. in 2002. I'm starting to need to research to get some parts, and I wondered, from your experience, is it easy to find a replacement clutch plate custom-made rather than waiting for something from the OEM to cut?
Oh, gosh. Well, first of all, I'm looking out at Dan Doucette to see if he's listening, to see if he can confirm that there were only 35 for the U.S. in 2002. But is it the Cambio Corsa or the manual stick shift car?
It's the manual. The Cambio Corsa is one I really wanted to avoid.
Yes.
Because just garbage hydraulic actuation on that transmission.
What's that, Dan? Oh, Dan Doucette affirms your number. He knows all. He knows more.
I think he's right.
Yeah, that's very cool. Not that you like it any more or less because there's 37 or 33, but it's always fun to bounce those numbers off Dan.
I have only heard of one made in yellow that year.
Interesting.
And that might be mine. I haven't heard of a second one. But with only 35, that's a plausible thing.
Right. So are you having issues with your clutch and you're trying to source replacement parts, or what's the...
Trying to be proactive and source replacement parts, because I know it's going to happen.
So like the rest of the world is doing with chicken and beef and cheese.
Baby food.
Yeah,
I need an exotic clutch plate.
Diesel exhaust fluid. Yeah, good question. I mean, here's the real answer. Probably should get a CNC shop and make your own, because the people making that stuff are becoming in greater short supply than the stuff itself. Good luck getting anything from the OEM, and yeah, it's you have kind of a double-edged sword though. There, you have only 35 cars, but having only 35 cars, you have guaranteed that there's no market that the aftermarket is going to cater to. So, you know, FCP Euro ECS Tuning are not going to supply aftermarket clutch plates for a 2002 Maserati.
Aftermarket?
Yeah.
And a quick second question. Do you think that this was a hidden gem? Because I got this for a little over $15,000.
Tony, what's your thoughts on the clutch sourcing thing?
My thoughts are that had this been a 1970s Maserati, they would have probably had like leftover inventory of these things sitting around because they weren't able to produce enough cars to use them.
Right.
So
just go buy 3 cars from the junkyard and
yeah,
use them as parts cars. But no, you certainly bought it quite right. We recently sold a 03 or 04 for like 28 grand. So the manuals I think are good cars. I mean, it's a detuned 430 motor, if I'm not correct. It's a 4.2 liter V8.
You are correct.
Yeah, and it's not as tight as
isn't
some
it also
other cars, but
isn't it a 90-degree crank instead of a flat crank on that one? Or am I thinking of something else?
You may be right. It's not an
You're correct. It's not a flat.
Yeah.
It's not a flat plane crank.
Yeah. Okay.
Dan signals Bailey. Bailey tells us yes.
That's why it doesn't sound as good as a 430. Anyway, no.
Concur. I'll agree.
Well, but good golly, it's a tenth of the cost of a 432. So let's be honest here. We're not going to get a little bent out of shape about some minor modifications. But the one we sold had a Tubi, and it actually sounded really, really good.
With those, I mean, I like that's the Jaguar designed one we're talking about, right?
Mm-hmm.
I like those. Aren't the two big concerns with those the heater core and the cam variators?
I don't know.
Okay. I believe it's a massive job that the heater cores leak, and it's a massive job to change them.
It wouldn't surprise me.
You might want to check on that.
It's Italian design, so yeah. My massive concern was the cambio Corsa and avoiding them like the plague. But I've only had two in 15, 16 years, so I'm not super up on all the common issues. But yeah, I would. Good luck. I mean, yes, I would stock up on them on any way you can, anywhere. Stock up on aftermarket parts, and I don't know, convince some machine shop to make you some or something, and then you can sell them to everybody else on the forum when they run out.
Let me add this. Like, you know, I'm dealing with a little bit older cars, the Lotus Esprits, and you know, the community gets to be. There comes a point in a rare exotic car's life where they're old enough that most people don't care about them, but they're not old enough to be celebrated, cherished classics. And at that point, the community of owners, at least I've seen this with Lotus and Lancia, the owners, they kind of band together. And there's always, you know, like right now, there's always some guy 3D printing, you know, an obsolete piece of Lotus trim. So, you know, there'll be someone who makes, you know, 20 years ago when you couldn't give away a Lancia Scorpion, there was a guy who did a run of the cooling pipe tubes that go through the chassis. So at some point, you know, you're probably going to, if there are 35 of these manual Maseratis, you're probably going to know 12 owners, and someone's going to do a run of clutch plates, you know, or is it the clutch plate they need, or the flywheel?
Yep.
Yeah.
So go on Masochist Owners Forum. I mean, Maserati Owners Forum, and join up there, and yeah, that is a good point about the community. There's always somebody that's resourceful and offering something up. So
and they'll do a run, and then they'll end up sending the leftovers to a vendor.
Yeah.
And then the vendor will mark them up and sell them off.
Yep.
So.
Yep. Awesome. Well, thanks for the call, Robert. Was that it, or did you have another question?
Very much. No, thank you so much for your time.
Absolutely. Enjoy the car. Go put a fat exhaust on it.
Have a good one.
You too. Thanks. Stefan Schaefer had a really good question that I wanted to ask before I forgot. So he's a wealth of internet knowledge, which most people say disparagingly, but it's one of those things where it's like he didn't learn everything from Wikipedia. He actually, the stuff he knows, you know, it's the saying, you can't believe everything you read on the internet. Well, everything Stefan reads is true, or everything he retains. He's been a great asset for our Lemons racing team with his forum knowledge. He asked, in the Esprit world, there's a lot of debate on whether the later years of the Turbo 4 or Turbo V8s are the better iteration of the Esprit S4. What are your thoughts on this and why? And as a background to this question, for those who don't know Tony owns a lot of Lotuses. Lodi?
Lotus.
Lotus
cars. If
you own and you have owned a lot of Esprits, including a yellow one that you accidentally bought for your 3-year-old daughter, but that's a whole nother story in and of itself. Yes, this man accidentally bought a car for his 3-year-old. The question:
the
Turbo 4 or
the
Turbo
late 4
V8?
cylinders versus the V8s.
Yes.
Okay. At one point, at At one point, people called the Esprit S4S the Toyota of Esprits. Okay, that was the ultimate evolution of the four-cylinder engine, and the production of the four-cylinder cars continued in Europe, even when we only had the V8. I think it went on to about 99 or so. But that engine was first developed in the early 70s, the Lotus four-cylinder, and it went through a whole lot of changes. But by the time you were in the late 80s with the Stevens-bodied cars, it became a pretty reliable engine and pretty long-lasting engine. And then that was up through the S4, and then the S4S, they made minor tweaks to it. I'm sure there's going to be a Lotus guru who knows more than me that might correct me on this, but I believe they stiffened the block a little bit for the S4S. And that car, that was the one where they just really got all the bugs worked out. And for the most part, also, the Renault transmission in those cars was much more robust than the Citroën gearbox that predated it. However, they never could get the shifter to work well. That was another thing that they made improvements with. And then came the V8 Esprit. And, the early cars, some of them had some issues with, I believe it was the adhesive on the cylinder liners or something to that effect.
That's a bad adhesive to have a problem with.
Yes. And
it's not like the door sill plate adhesive.
Yeah, it wasn't. So, but some of the early V8s had issues, and that was a brand new engine for Lotus, and a lot of the V8 owners will tell you it's an excellent engine, but there's definitely debate on it, and I fall on the side, not by a massive margin, but I do fall firmly on the side of the S4S is the one to have.
Yeah, I like the more modern styling of them, but so my only experience with Esprits, and they were a kind of a childhood dream car, right? They were on my wall,
yep,
all that. But it was kind of a never meet your heroes thing, because the first Esprit that I ever transacted, I took in on trade, and it was a turbo V8 car. It was a final edition or some sort of, it was an 03, so it was either an anniversary or final edition, some sort of special edition thing.
That's all they had towards the end.
Right, yeah. A lot of manufacturers do that. But I remember going through the receipts, and right before I bought it, had a huge service on it, brand new turbos, et cetera, but I still was so gun shy on them because they just had a notorious reputation for being abysmal from a reliability standpoint. And I immediately wholesaled it off because of that, because I didn't want to have to deal with the after-sale headaches. And about a month after I sold it, the dealer came back to me all bent out of shape because the turbos were leaking oil or something, and they thought it was, my fault. And I'm like, dude, listen, you have two problems. One, you bought a Lotus, so you should have known going in. Two, I had all the receipts that all this work was done. How is that on me that so that was my only experience with a modern Esprit, and it was enough to make me really, really gun shy about ever stepping foot near one from an ownership perspective. Even though I love the styling, it's more of a childhood love for it because of the nostalgia, and I like the looks of them, but I don't want to actually experience them.
And the first thing that came to my mind, and don't answer this, but who did the work?
I don't remember. That's a good question.
With an Esprit, that is so critical because, I've learned over the years, you can't take an Esprit. A lot of people have taken an Esprit to a Porsche or Ferrari shop or, some exotic car place, but they don't work on, any. And you really have to take one to a specialist, somebody who knows what they're doing. And the other thing is the factory workshop manual for the Esprit. It tells you everything you need to know, and you need to do exactly what it says. If it says use this particular sealant, get that particular sealant, even if you have to order it from the UK. Don't use this substitute, or there are some substitute sealants you can use, certain Loctites and whatnot, but you want to, if you want to get advice from an expert on servicing it, and if you service it with the right parts exactly as the manual says, it will be a reliable car.
Mm-hmm.
And another compare.
But that's a problem for most Corvette and Mustang owners, though, because
Yes.
they don't want to change the oil ever, or the tires, for that matter.
And that's a great example. The oil filter, the Lotus, or there are at least half a dozen oil filters that have the exact same can shape and size as the Lotus oil filter, and some of them have an anti-drain back valve and some of them don't. And the filter sits on the top of, now I'm talking about the 4 cylinders here, okay? The filter sits on the top of the engine, and it sucks it sucks the oil up through a tube and then spits it out through the bearings and up to the cam boxes. And if you don't have that anti-drain back valve, then when you start that engine, it's going to run 5 to 10 seconds without oil pressure. So then you get the guy who starts the engine, who puts the wrong filter on it, starts the engine, and the first thing he goes, "Vroom." Okay.
Oops.
Yeah. Oops. And then, that wears out the bearings prematurely.
Yeah.
And the rings or whatever else.
It's like every Lamborghini Gallardo owner, Cars and Coffee. I'm going to spit flames for the Instagrams. Wah, rah, 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 rah. Yeah. And then the car goes up in flames. Okay. Another word from another sponsor. Boxcast. This podcast is this SwitchCast Switch Cars Boxcast. Yes. We thought about coming up with, I'm in a band with the founder of Boxcast, and we thought about coming up with a name because I founded Switch Cars and he founded Boxcast, and we were trying to come up with a band name that was a play on that, and it was like SwitchCast and the Box Cars or something like that. So now a podcast is called SwitchCast, and it's sponsored by Boxcast. Boxcast is a live streaming company based in Cleveland, Ohio, and they serve broadcasters and viewers around the world. Their founders launched Boxcast back in 2013 with one purpose: to make people part of the experience. If you're looking to live stream your podcast, church service, car show, your car party, you could live stream your car party, sporting event, wedding, or even your Cannonball attempt, your failing Cannonball attempt. I'll make sure that's... Boxcast is an easy, flexible live streaming platform for organizations. It's so easy. We're live streaming this show to multiple platforms with a phone. Head over to switchcars.com/boxcast for your free trial. Once again, you can call in and ask Tony K your questions, 216-294-4124, or you can post your comments wherever you're watching live, and we're going to go to some of those now because I don't want to just answer my own questions. Robert Adams says, my Cars and Coffee has an exotics parking section with the rule: no Maseratis. John Harrison says in the 80s, the Europeans had the best car colors available. Okay, I feel like we got to talk about John Harrison a little bit. So you are such a massive Cannonball fan that you own...
I own a Lotus Esprit S1 that is identical to the car that John Harrison campaigned in the 1979 Cannonball.
Yes. And did you buy it because of that? Like, were you searching out one, same color, same spec, or?
No, I bought it because I love the color combination.
Mm-hmm.
I first saw the car around the year 2000 or so, and I just loved it. And I was acquainted with the owner through a Yahoo group. And I said, if you ever want to sell it, let me know. And, a few years...
Yahoo group.
Yes, Yahoo groups.
Man.
Yes, wow. And he had owned it, he was a longtime owner of the car, and he, when it came time for him to sell it, he reached out to me, and I was not in a position to buy it at the time, and he ended up selling to someone else local in Central Florida. And that person owned it for a couple of years, and then he put it on eBay, and there it is. And somebody else in Central Florida bought it, and owned it for a couple of years. And then in early 2007, and in the 2000s, I had kind of become a hub for trading Lotus Esprit S1s. When people wanted to buy one, they asked me if I knew of any, and when people wanted to sell one, they asked me if I could help them find a buyer. Well, the gentleman who had his name's Mike. Hey, Mike, who owned the car in the mid 2000s. He reached out to me. He said, "Hey, you don't know me, but I know you do a lot with early Esprits. I'm looking to find a good home for this car. And the only person I can find to buy it locally wants to buy it for his teenage kid."
Oh God.
And I said,
such a terrible idea.
Yeah. I said, "You're not going to believe this, but I want to buy your car."
Because that was the one you had missed out on a few years ago.
That was it. Yep. That was it. So I finally bought it in 2007, and it wasn't. I had known that. I had read Brock Yates' Cannonball book. I forget when it came out, but I had known that there were two Esprit S1s in the '79 Cannonball, and I don't remember the timing of what happened or anything, but at some point, John Harrison joined one of the Lotus forums. I think it's a now defunct forum. I can't remember what it was called, Lotus Buzz or something like that. And he posted some pictures from the Cannonball. Oh wow, and it was either that or then when you watch the movie, when all the cars are parked at the hotel in New York or in Connecticut, in the parking lot, a number of the cars in the parking lot are actual cars from the Cannonball.
Yes.
And you can see John's car in the background. I was like, look, there's an Oxford blue Esprit S1 there, and so it came to somewhere between that clip in the movie, or I think it was probably the clip in the movie. I don't know, but I came to the knowledge of the fact that hey, this is identical to John's car, and there were a couple dozen Oxford blue S1s, and there kind of became this. I think there were a number of people who were quietly searching to find where's the blue
Cannonball one. The actual. Does anybody know where the actual one is?
Yes, it had been. It was somewhere in Scandinavia. I don't know, Norway or Finland. John would know because he's been in touch with them, and it had big surprise. It had been painted white.
Oh, so, that's right. I did hear that. Yeah. Okay.
And it's being restored now. But anyway, so I just decided. I had, I like to get fun license plates on my cars, and for a long time, for about 11 or 12 years, I had a white Esprit S1, a factory Monaco or a factory gel coat white car, and I held off. The license plate in Ohio, PPW 306R, had been available for years, and I held off. I'm not going to get it. No, that's kind of hokey. I'm not going to do it. And then one day I checked O plates, and it was gone. And I checked VinWiki or wherever it is, you can look it up, and it had been registered to like a Chrysler Town and Country minivan. Oh, no. So I said before, and the license plate Cannonball, Cannonball, I had gotten that idea from actually that red Trans Am, that Super Duty has that in that article from, and I said, you know what, before someone with a BMW or something buys that plate, with a Z3 or something like that, buys that plate and puts on it. Okay, it's not a real Cannonball car.
If you're listening, Donadelli's making fun of you for having Cannonball plates on all your BMWs.
I said I'm going to go ahead and get that plate and put it on the blue car and call it a tribute.
There you go.
So there it is.
And now you just need a CB radio and ancient tires.
I think I've got the ancient tires.
So for those of you that don't know, and this is not a knock at all. It's just the Lotus had a DNF because it had an experience with a guardrail. I believe in Ohio. Yeah, but the backstory is a little bit funny because they were in such a rush to get to the starting line that they had skimped on tires, and it was either that they didn't replace the tires that should have, or they went to some local tire shop and just put on really cheap tires. The story's in the book. I don't remember the details of it, but that turned out to be part of their undoing, with a combination of wet weather and fatigue and all that. So that was everybody was fine. They just had an intimate experience with the guardrail, but that happens. But there's the joke about old tires on the Cannonball Tribute Lotus. Because if you have to explain it, it's not funny. But okay, back to the question. Sorry. Speaking of the Lotus and John, so there's a Cannonball reunion coming up in September. I think it's the third weekend in September in New
19th?
York. Something like that. Yeah, the 19th, I think, on a Saturday.
Somewhere around there, yeah.
Are you going to bring your Lotus to it?
I will do my best.
Okay.
As the Great Marks Concord Elegance, I think it is.
Okay. You know more about it than I do, and I'm supposed to be there, so as are you. But I just know that I'll go somewhere and do what people tell me to do. So, yes. So hopefully your car will be there. Mark your calendars. This is going to be great. It's going to be a really cool reunion of past and present Cannonball cars. Angry Ursula should be there. The Fraud Taurus. I think Boleyn's bringing up his car. I'm sure the Boston guys will bring down theirs. And some old Cannonball cars have been located. Travis is going to bring out his Transcon Medevac. We met somebody at Amelia this year who ran in the 79 Cannonball in their Mercedes 300 SEC, I think it was. And they still own it, so hopefully they'll be bringing it up. I tried to buy it off them to no avail, but as John Harrison also says, don't knock the S1 unless you've owned one. That's funny. Nick Kruger asks, I've always wanted an XJR and or XKR. How much worse? That's a good start to a question about a Jaguar. How much worse is the 4.0 versus the 4.2? Do I need to pay the premium for the 03 and up, even with good maintenance records?
Yes.
Yes. The 03 and up is a 4.2, right? That's
Correct.
Yes.
Correct.
Okay. That was the one that they put in the Land Rovers and Jaguars and kind of across the
4.0 is 4.0. So, there's a reason that the 95 through 97 6-cylinder XJs are worth more than the 98 to 01s.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
All right. Easy answer there. Go for the 4.2. I'll let you refute this one. Mr. CJ IRL. German cars equal good. British cars equal made of biscuits. Like from Popeyes. They start to crumble after an hour of ownership. You take an hour to eat your biscuits from Popeyes? Come on. I mean, that's a whole nother problem.
I have a saying. This is something that's been repeated at the car party many times. If you want to enjoy the drive... No, wait. If you want to be seen, you take the Italian car. If you want to enjoy the drive, you take the British car. But when you absolutely have to get there, you take the German car.
You'll be parked on the street at Tony's party, but you'll get there. You'll get there. Thank you to Tyler to John for giving us one of the button things where you can tip our show. We appreciate that. That's a really cool feature, and I know he's had some really great questions every week. He's a stalwart of the show. No, a loyal listener. Searching for words here live is really awesome. He said, "Keep up the good work, duder," and asked if I'll ever visit in Charlotte. I was actually in Charlotte a year and a half ago. I was down there buying a Mercedes for my wife, and it was kind of in the middle of the pandemic, so it was half the stuff was closed. We tried to go to Foreign Cars Italia. I don't even know if that's in Charlotte. It's Greensboro. I think that's Charlotte. And got yelled at for not wearing a mask and not having an appointment. And then they realized I might actually be a buyer and said, "Oh, yeah, come back, and we can find you a salesman." And I was like, "Yeah, no, the cars are more interesting in the service bay anyway," because it was all just new Ferraris. And I don't know what it is about new exotic cars. Don't do that much for me.
They're
anymore,
too big.
But Yeah, and they kind of all look the same, but yeah. Neil Klassen, you should tell them.
Neil.
Who's that? Oh, he's talking to you. Oh, Neil, the guy with the
He had
salmon colored CLK 430.
the quartz colored.
Quartz.
CLK,
Yes. Yeah. I saw him in Amelia. You should tell them about our Cannonball trip to Miami. I don't think he can. I think that was one of the things he said he didn't want to discuss. The alleged trip.
In a nutshell. So Neil is from South Africa, and he was buying in 2005. I have some very good friends in Miami. My one friend, it was a family, the parents and three sons, and they were in the jewelry business, and I was buying a diamond ring for my soon-to-be wife, to propose to her, and they found me a very high quality diamond, that gave me a family kind of price, and at the same time, my best friend of the three of them, he had an Alfa Romeo GTV6 that once again, this was 2005. You couldn't give away a car like that,
right?
And Neil had to have a GTV.
Those days.
Neil wanted a GTV6, so we went down in my '85 944, Porsche 944, and we met my friend with the GTV6 is Mauricio, and his brother Jose. We met them at Mauricio's condo building, and it was kind of a surreal sight because they were replacing the balconies on the building, so we were just standing in this massive construction site, and I asked Jose, do you have the ring? And he's just standing there. He says nothing, just pops it open, and it's glinting in the sun, and meanwhile Neil is checking out the GTV6, and so we had a fun drive back from Miami back up to wherever in Ohio. I don't even remember where, Columbus, it was very interesting because we had two 1985 2.5 liter cars with the transaxle in the back.
Mm-hmm.
One's German and one's Italian, and so we had a
Did you have a trailer hitch on the 944 for when the Alpha broke?
They both made it. But so we actually took somewhere. I'll dig up the logo, but we took the Cannonball logo, and we called it with a nod to Neil's heritage, we call it the Afro Cannonball.
That's awesome. That's pretty good. Oh, Neil's a great dude. So you bought cars before they were popular. A lot of them. You talked a few times about when you couldn't give those cars away, and some of them still aren't popular. What dream cars have you wanted that you didn't get a chance to buy that have recently gotten popular, very popular, and maybe priced you out? Like, what's something you had your eye on that you maybe waited too long? And I hate talking about the market, but the market is what the market is. There's no denying that it's gone up and up on a lot of these cars.
I'll answer that question simply with nothing. Okay.
That's a good place to be.
There are, I answered a questionnaire recently, what's your dream car? What car would you like to have? I was well into these exotics of the 70s and 80s before everybody else was. So I had lots of opportunity to buy a lot of things when nobody wanted. You used to be able to buy a Countach for $80,000, and at one point I had a handful of Esprits and a couple of 308s and a little bit of money, and I thought to myself, hey, I could buy one of these 3 or 4 Countaches that are languishing on eBay right now. And I had an opportunity to sit in one, and I said to myself, it's never going to be this cheap again. If you want one, you better do it now, because 10 years from now, it's going to be $200,000. And I just decided that, it's nice, but I don't think I want one, and I'd say, and then, there are cars like the Lancia Stratos and the 037 that I never really wanted to own them because, I do like to drive my cars, and, those two cars, when they were too young to import, back when, so I never took too much of an interest in them because I just didn't feel it was feasible to import one.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I'm kind of lucky that my collection hasn't gone Stratos, but it has gone up enough that there isn't really anything I want that's out of reach right now.
Sure.
So.
Good. So we talked about something else at dinner, and this is something I struggle with a lot, is the balance between being a collector and desiring the variety of having a lot of things and trying a bunch of different cars, which you can do that just by having car ADD and rotating in and out of it. The old keep your woman but switch cars theory. You're kind of the more keep your woman and amass cars type of deal, but you do trade in and out. But anyway, I digress. But owning a lot of cars comes with storage concerns, which you're storing cars off-site
all over
at a
the
different
place.
house, all over the place, and insurance and maintenance, and just a lot of headache, and even just trying to find the time to drive all of them. Right.
And keeping track of the keys too. But go on.
Yeah, the keys. Yes. Well, the keys don't matter on old British cars because it's not going to start anyway. So, then the thought goes, okay, and I've had this thought and kind of went through this process last year where I sold off a bunch of cars because I'm like, I want to get one really crazy car. Like, it's cool being a car collector and having all this variety, but maybe I'm spoiled because I have variety anyway. If I want to drive a different car, I can pull something out of inventory and drive it. But I just got tired of having cars I couldn't drive and that I had to think about being fixed and spend money on. I'm like, just get one. So have you ever thought, like, is there a car that you would say, man, I'd sell like 5 or 6 to get that? Or have you gone back and forth of, this is crazy, I don't need 13 cars, let me just get 1 or 2 unicorns?
I think about that frequently, and I don't think there is a car that I would sell 5 or 6 to get one of. Okay. If I did, it would be the Countach, but I've kind of decided that,
I guess the better question is, how often has your wife said you should sell 5 or 10 of these?
Patty has been very supportive of me, because the other thing that the car hobby has done, it has, we've met great people.
Mm-hmm.
We've traveled all over the world because of these cars.
Mm-hmm.
It has created, tremendous social opportunity. Patty loves the car party because she's the hostess of it.
Mm-hmm.
And so, they have been they've just been great all around. And, in the last several years, I've been buying more than selling, and, the number of cars floated up.
Mm-hmm.
And something we didn't get to talk about at dinner, but that maybe we'll squeak it into here is I've kind of taken a liking to the cars of the 2000s.
Okay.
It's
good styling.
So
it was a good period of cars.
Yes. Yeah. I'm going to back up to, we talked about the Malaise era and Radwood and all
Mm-hmm.
of that.
Which you had a good point. You said Radwood should stop in like the early 90s. Because there's a big shift. Go on.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I went too long in the preface. I'm thankful for Radwood because that finally brought these cars that I like into the collector spotlight. They were no longer, Porsche 944 is no longer a $3,500 car. They were the millennial generation, somewhere around the year 2015 or so, just the millennial generation started buying cars, and
Mm-hmm.
the market raised. And so finally my $8,000 Lotus Esprit became a $15,000 Lotus Esprit overnight, right? And
retire now.
so And I have as far as Radwood goes, I think it's great that the 80s and 90s are being celebrated, but those are two so disparately different, so distinctly different decades. I mean, car culture and popular culture just did an about face. Somewhere I said 92, you said what, 94 or 95?
Yeah.
So,
Well, it started in 92 because
Yeah.
they were designing those cars. The Viper is maybe even a good example of that. It came out in 92. They were penning it in 89.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's always a few year cycle there.
I would reframe everything. I would relabel automotive history. I would have what I would call an era the exotic car era, and it starts with the Miura. That was really the first mid-engine low slung Lamborghini. It starts with the Miura. It ends with the F40 or the NSX. And the reigning queen of that era is the Countach. Okay, that was a special time in automotive history. And yeah, there were 355s and what was the I love the 456, but what was the flagship, the V12 in the 90s Ferrari?
The 550 Maranello.
Yeah.
The late
okay.
90s. Yep.
Yeah, those weren't on anybody's bedroom wall. Okay. Not that I knew of.
Well, the 550 was on my
right.
wall, but
okay.
anyway.
All right, but
in the sense that
Yeah.
Porsche 930s, slant nose, and Countaches and all that were on the wall. Yeah, those are iconic for that. Yes.
Yeah, there aren't. Yeah, those are iconic cars, and in the 80s, people tried to look. Everything was glamorous. People tried to look pretty, and if you had an exotic car, you were
big hair and big wings and big vents.
Yeah, and if you had an exotic car, you were cool. And at some point from the mid 90s onward, if you liked an exotic car or a sports car, it meant you were an insecure, egotistical jerk who was compensating for something. And you could see that in the market. The cars that were $100,000 in the late 80s, early 90s were suddenly $25,000, $30,000. Just the market plummeted.
Yeah. Well, and that was also outside forces. I mean, the Japanese were buying up all those cars, and
Yes.
their market fell apart.
And also, these cars that were like impossible feats, these Ferraris and Lamborghinis and Lotus of the 80s. In the late 80s, in the early 90s, the Japanese came along and made something that was faster, as fast as all of them, and reliable too.
Yeah.
The NSX, even the 300Z, the twin turbo Z,
Yep. And the Supra, for that
the
matter.
Supra.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely.
And so that just kind of put an end to an era, okay? But then I would call the next era from about 96 to, like 93 to 95. That's like a transition period. Stylists lost their way. Like the Pantera had like all those tack-on body, the cars that kind of lingered into the mid-90s from the 70s and 80s, like the XJS or whatever. They had all these plastic add-ons to the body. They didn't know where to go, right? And then, the cars of the 90s were a lot of, jelly bean aero blobs. So the styling was completely different. Pop culture was completely different. We went from Miami Vice and pastel suits to grunge.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
you see a little bit of that at the Radwood shows. It's kind of
Yeah.
this mixed thing of people aren't sure which way to go.
Yeah, and there wasn't, but that was so you were either one or the other. In the 90s, if you were, if you looked and dressed, there's that scene in that Adam Sandler movie where he pulls up in that Trans Am to the high school. Mm-hmm. That's kind of what it was.
Yep.
But 1996 kicked off a great era in the 2000s. I think we're going to look back on the 2000s as a great period in automotive history. Mm-hmm. Displacements were getting bigger. Horsepower was increasing every year. There were small cars with V8s again. Mm-hmm. And
the sports sedan war.
The sports
with
sedan
BMW M5 and E55 and XJR.
Yeah, and
XKR.
And stylists finally came out of their shells. There were a lot of interesting cars. Although there's a lot of retro stuff, but there was a lot of the 90s were kind of boring. With the jelly bean blobs. But I would call that period from about, it really kicked off in 96 with OBD2.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say it probably ended somewhere around 2008 to 2010, somewhere in that area. And at that point, I know the recession helped put an end to things, but also, very quietly displacement started getting smaller, and the 2-liter turbo became the standard motor, where the 3.5-liter V6 used to be the base motor, right? But I think if we look back, and I may be mistaken here, but I think you also saw a little bit less of designed obsolescence or product life cycle in cars in the 2000s than in the 2010s.
Absolutely.
So, what I see from and also the other thing is, in the 90s, the water-based paints and leather dyes were new, and they weren't that good. We had a lot of cars with peeling clear coat and all that. Really, by the 2000s, they were still, rust-proofing was still very good on a lot of cars. They had perfected the water-based paints and dyes. So a lot of cars have good longevity from the 2000s. Look how many are on the road today, right?
Yes.
And, we had the low emissions and ULEV vehicles. We just had a lot of efficient, powerful cars. Some, like I said, some finally some interesting styling. And, I think it's going to be looked back upon as kind of a golden era. And I think,
I agree.
Yeah.
I mean, that was kind of my era of coming into appreciating cars more in the late 90s. The beginning of that era growing up was the cars that influenced me. So I'm biased. I think that is and forever will be the golden era. But yeah.
It's an age thing,
Yeah. We got time for a couple more questions. We're going to pull the ones off the live stream here, and then we'll wrap up. So, man, this is actually a good question. We'll try to answer it quickly. Elon Musk is suspicious. 43. With all this talk of an impending recession, I'm very curious about how things were in 2008. What effects did the 2008 recession have on the car business and car values? I heard a very good delineation of kind of what's going on now, or maybe I read an article about how the recession now is not going to look anything like the 2008 and 2009 recession. That was a drastic drop, a bottom falling out of a house of cards, which the inflation we have now of assets, of housing and cars is not caused by the same factors as what happened in 2007 and 2008. So I don't think we're going to have a bottom falling out. But all that to say, 2008, really 2009 is when it affected things. It was scary. I mean, the stock market went to 7,500. I think was about the bottom of the Dow Jones.
March of 2009.
Yeah. Houses 30 to 50% off. Car values. I mean, dealers went bankrupt left and right. Every exotic car leasing company went bankrupt. All the ones that advertised in DuPont Registry, because there's so many people leasing Lamborghinis and kind of commodity exotic cars that just their values evaporated overnight. There was a customer of mine had a warehouse in Florida where Aston Martin was shipping their new cars and just storing them there because the dealers refused delivery because they couldn't sell what they had on their lot. It was nasty. It was really, really bad, really, really scary.
In looking at the older cars, I think there had been a number of people who had, bought cars on home equity lines and things like that. And
that was the thing to do.
Yeah. So there were a lot of fire sales.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And people are doing that now too. People are making the same mistakes today that they made back then. And that will come back to bite people. Like leveraging debt based on your assets going up in value is never, ever a good thing. Trying to spend the wealth that you have on paper, unless that paper is cash in your wallet, it's just not a good thing, because if those things reverse, if you lose your job, if anything goes backwards, then you have to pay those things off or they get taken from you. And when that happens on a massive scale, that's when the values reverse. So, yeah, I'm interested to see what happens, but I don't think it's going to be a recession, anything like what we saw back then. John Harrison said, if anyone offers you a ride in an LM002, run away. Is that like the exotic version of a creeper van? No, it's the Lamborghini SUV, with the Countach engine. I just think that's funny. Dave Klink, who is a master Mercedes mechanic and doesn't usually say anything good about anything not Mercedes, said, I liked the S-type and I gave the X-type an E for effort. There, I said it. All right. VLM Chris said, embrace the garbage because for the price of a new Tahoe, you can buy a lot of cheap future classics. In quotes. For the price of a new Tahoe, you can buy a friggin' house. Yeah. Holy cow. Tyler DeJohn, this is the last question we'll answer from the live stream. Part of me wants to buy a 97 Viper GTS, good car. The other wants an 02 to 04 Corvette C5 Z06, which would be able to hang better and be more enjoyable. I'd rather look at the Viper in my garage any day of the week. I'd rather drive the Z06 because it has working air conditioning. That's the answer for me.
That's out of my wheelhouse.
Yeah. Too new, too not obscure. Bailey.
Hello.
The man back from Texas.
Hi. I was wondering if you had any input on that financial question about our market. Because I know you're in that world a little bit.
I don't try to predict the future.
Okay. That's all.
I don't either, but people keep asking me to. And I'm like, that's not in my job description. So I try to make up answers and, end up saying nothing. But they're like, man, that was really great. Thank you. Yeah, it's the whole concept of the next big thing. Everybody wants to know what the next big thing is. And I'm like, that's not, number one, I don't know. Number two, that's not why you should buy a car.
When I bought my first Esprit, nobody, like I said, there were Classic and Sports Car, one of those magazines. It had a front page article, Classics to Avoid, and there's a picture of a Lotus Esprit S1. I didn't care. I liked it.
That's it. That's it. I would love for somebody to come out with articles that say Classics to Avoid about like Lamborghini Diablo or basically anything I want. Because I wouldn't care if I got laughed out of Cars and Coffee. I just wouldn't go. I'd go drive it myself and take pictures and look at the pictures myself. Anyway, all right, we're going to head towards the end here. Anything, Tony, that you want to get in before we go to the props and flops?
That John Harrison is right. Drive an Esprit S1.
Drive an Esprit S1. All right. Tony, thank you so much for being on tonight.
Thanks, Doug.
Yes. The props and flops of the night are brought to you by Switch Cars. Switch Cars is the enthusiasts dealership where we buy, sell, consign, service, and store only cars that we like ourselves. Check out our hand-picked inventory at switchcars.com. Our pick, actually, I made Tony do the pick of the week from Switch Cars inventory, and your pick was?
It is the Bentley
Continental GT
Le Mans edition. So it will get you to the pregnancy class really, really fast. Dad joke. I had to get one in. Yes. No. So that one I sort of intended to buy for myself, but nothing really is. It's a sapphire blue over bourbon interior. Cognac.
Not cognac. No. Strong. It's a stronger interior. More alcohol content. I don't know. Proof. I'm struggling. There's a joke there somewhere, but I'm not getting it yet. Anyway, it's got 60,000 miles, but if I told you it had 6,000 miles, you would believe it. Was
beautiful.
That interior
it's gorgeous.
Stinking perfect? Every receipt from the Bentley dealer, serviced 2-3 times a year, whether it needed it or not, which it always did because it's a Bentley. But seriously, it is one of the best ones I've driven. It's super tight. The guy took incredible care of it. So anyway, may have found something in Europe that I want to try to buy and import. So that one is going to be up for sale. So if you want a good deal on a 1 of 49 Le Mans edition Bentley Continental GT, drop us a line.
In the perfect color combination.
Yes. Use discount code SwitchCast to save $1,000 off whatever asking price we decide. Our prop of the week, this has kind of broken the internet, so I'm not going to say much about it, but The Drive reports that you can now rent from Hertz a 900 horsepower Ford Mustang GT500. That's right.
They did that in the 60s, right?
Well, yeah, but not 900 horsepower. No. And they did it again in 2006 because they brought back the Shelby GTH, but it was it wasn't even a Shelby. It was basically just a Mustang GT with the Shelby stripes on it, and they literally deleted the traction control button, so you couldn't turn the traction control off. I was really annoyed because I had one and I wanted to do a burnout. I'm like, what the crap? I think they were all in automatic, but yeah. So if you want to do a really inefficient Cannonball, you can go out and rent a 900 horsepower Ford Mustang from Hertz, and I don't know, put like a RF blanket over it so they don't know what you're doing, because I'm pretty sure they're going to monitor your usage of that. So anyway, that's cool. I'm glad that some company still doesn't care about their insurance policy or the license status of their renters. The flop of the week, let's see, Rally Road is an app where you can buy fractional shares of exotic cars. They're now just called Rally, and you can buy fractional shares of all sorts of luxury items, watches, baseball cards, Beanie Babies, I don't know, maybe even NFTs. There's nothing more fake about literally buying a piece of a digital piece of something. I don't know. But anyway, Rally Road launched an ad campaign. They've been blowing up my Instagram and Facebook, and it's the tagline is, billionaires don't buy stocks, they own assets, which is ridiculous because Warren Buffett his net worth is made up almost exclusively of stocks. Elon Musk, I mean, you name it, billionaires absolutely do buy stocks because stocks have gone up in value on an average of about 10% a year since their inception. It's a fantastic investment. Yes, they also do own assets, but here's the thing. Buying a fractional piece of something is not buying the asset. You're literally buying a stock in it. So their own ad campaign is like negating what they're selling. They're asking you to buy a stock in an asset that you don't have.
I'd rather drive the car.
Exactly. But you don't want to buy 1% of a Jaguar XJ220 that's being stored somewhere in New York? Anyway, yeah, the comment section, I'm not the only one that feels this way. The comment section of all their ads is a dumpster fire, as it should be. Anyway, Tony K, thank you for being on the show tonight. I look forward to seeing you at some Cars and Coffee this season. Where and when is Toledo Cars and Coffee if people want to come out?
It is the second Sunday of every month, as long as there's no salt on the roads.
Gotcha.
Sometimes
so we're clear.
November, December. And then it is at River Place Shops in Perrysburg.
Gotcha. And no burnouts, no boring cars. Gray German sedans have to park in the Camry lot. Awesome. Thank you to our sponsors, Boxcast Nuts for Sticks, Switch Cars, Celebrity Machines, and Stephen Holm Woodworking, who made us this amazing desk. Thank you to our producer and call screener, Ethan Huffnagel. Our bumper music was provided by Emily and Ivory. You can stream their full album on Spotify or SoundCloud. This episode will be available Friday in audio format wherever you listen to podcasts. Thank you for joining us tonight, and we'll see you next Wednesday at 8 p.m., where we'll look forward to answering your automotive questions to help you on the drive of your life.